In part one, we followed a 17th century diamond dealer on an epic journey over 240,000 kilometers. I'm Matthew Weldon, and today on Gem Pursuit, we're going to find out if it was worth it. So Fenia, we had talked already about some of his voyages, but where did we leave it off the last time?
The last time we were just about to explore the Sixth Voyage, which is the trip that made Tavernier famous.
So he's already done 5, and for anyone who hasn't listened to the last one, let's just explain that these voyages, they take a few years. They're not like, a couple of months here or a few weeks there. They can be between like 3, 4, 5, even I think it's the longest one was 6 years. So all across, typically by land, across the India and Asia and everywhere in between. So these are serious voyages, and he's already done 5. We're on to the 6th one today.
The 6th one took Tavernier to the court of the Mughal emperor for the 2nd time. It wasn't the first time Tavernier was going there, but it was definitely an experience of a lifetime for him. This is the time the merchant sees from up close treasures of immense value and beauty, and he has the chance to handle jewelry pieces from the imperial casket. This has happened before as well during the 2nd voyage. He's given the opportunity as well this time, and he also has the opportunity to see from up close the very famous Peacock Throne of the Mughal emperor. We are situated in Delhi. The capital of the empire has changed to Delhi this time, and the emperor is Aurangzeb. This is Shah Jahan's son. The previous time Tavernier visited Shah Jahan himself, and now it's his son. And what does he see, Matthew, when he goes to the court?
He gets to the court and he knows there's amazing diamonds in this area. Like, he's seen some of them, he's already traded quite a few, but what he sees really stays with him, and I think it would stay with anyone if they would have seen this, because it would have been so unexpected. But what it's called is, they call it the Peacock Throne. Now, a throne we would understand, of course, but the reason it's called the Peacock is that this throne is encrusted with all sorts of gemstones at a scale that even Tavernier probably was surprised at.
It wasn't exactly a chair or something like that. It was even grander than this. It was basically a large platform with bedazzled columns leading to a canopy, and it owes its name to 2 ornamental peacocks positioned at the top of the canopy, and also covered in precious gemstones. We have pearls hanging from the canopy, rubies, emeralds, and legend says that the famous Koh-i-Noor diamond was also a part of this magnificent structure.
But what's great about Tavernier, and that we talked about last as well, is he's a good note keeper, right? So I know you're a historian by trade, right? So we can, it's a contemporaneous account of someone who really knew what he was doing, what was in it. So you got 108 rubies, emeralds and pearls. As you said, a pearl, a 50-carat pearl on the peacock's breast. So
the throne itself doesn't survive as a whole to this day. The Mughal Empire was sieged. Was not the correct word. It was attacked by the
sieged
by the Persians at some point, and the throne was taken, broken apart later on, and now we don't have traces of it anymore. But we do have very detailed descriptions by Tavernier. We also have lots of manuscripts from that time period depicting the throne. So if you just Google the Peacock Throne or Shah Jahan himself, you will see lots of manuscripts of the throne, which was commissioned.
I'm actually a little bit angry hearing that thing. I'm just like, why would they do that? Like, I know obviously why they did it, because they wanted to take the jewels and the gold, but it's just it's a travesty. Like, imagine they had that today.
It is, yes, it is. The throne itself was supposed to be something extremely impressive, awe-provoking. It's very interesting that this particular throne was created with the purpose of attributing almost like divine qualities to the emperor himself. So the Mughal emperors were Muslim emperors, and Islam is an Abrahamic religion, meaning that it draws lots of elements from manuscript scripture like the Old Testament. And we know that when Shah Jahan ordered the throne, he had in mind the famous throne of Solomon, who was celebrated for being very just, being very powerful and just ruler. And in those scriptures, Solomon's throne is described as bedazzled with beautiful gemstones. So when Shah Jahan commissioned a new throne for himself, he had this particular description from those scriptures in mind, and the whole structure purposely evoked the bejeweled throne of Solomon.
So this voyage was 1664 to 1668. So again, in total, 64, 65, 66, 68, 5 years or so, 4.5 to 5 years. So, and this one really was his most famous expedition. Saw the Peacock Throne, looked in the jewel casket, but from his point of view, the purpose of the journey was for him to clear his inventory. So it was actually a sales trip. Fundamentally, it was like a retirement sale. Is that fair enough? Maybe I don't think he was quite retired yet, but
I don't think that a guy like Tavernier ever had retirement in his mind, to be honest.
But that was 1664. He was born in 1605. So he was 59 when he left. That's a hard journey. I know I've tried to get my dad to go on a couple of wine trips with me and work the show at Miami, and I can't get him to do it. So that's what airline travel. So to make that journey, I'd say he was on a camel.
Imagine.
Yes.
It's difficult to take Jimmy with you overseas on a plane. Imagine trying to convince him to do that on a camel.
So he's on a 6 foot. This was a stock mix. He's trying to sell everything. The Aurangzeb reception of this one, very famous moment, and he discovers quite an important diamond on this trip. He's handled a lot of diamonds, right? And the way he grades diamonds, he's got good ones and bad ones basically, and he kind of treats them all as more or less as if they're white diamonds. Color doesn't really come into it. But this particular stone is one of the most famous ones. It's in loads of Gem Pursuit episodes. So, if you're a regular listener, you'll know the stone. But this is when it's discovered on the Sixth Voyage of Jean-Baptiste Tavernier. He discovers the blue diamond.
Yes, it's very difficult to miss this one. The blue diamond, later known as the Hope Diamond, it's discovered in its rough form by Tavernier during this time. There are lots of interpretations of how he managed to acquire this stone. Some people say he bought it, other people say he stole it from a temple. That's what the legend says. We're not really sure. So yeah, he acquired the rough form of the diamond. So it's not, if you ever go to the Smithsonian Museum today, where the diamond is possessioned and showcased to the public, you will see very beautiful faceted, of course. This is not what Tavernier saw when first.
It's been recalled a few times.
Yes, it was firstly recast by a French jeweler, or it was commissioned by the Sun King, or the French king himself.
Maybe the 14th.
Yeah. So Tavernier acquires the diamond, takes everything back to Europe, and reaches the French court and presents lots of jewels to the king. It was not only the French blue, it was not only this particular stone, other gemstones as well. The king is very pleased with the entire lot, purchased at a very high price. He's actually so happy, he also gives him a title. So Tavernier becomes a baron, if I'm not mistaken, after this incident, and he purchases his own chateau in Switzerland.
I think we should talk about some of the really important stones that he had. He had quite a few, just amazing diamonds. And it's really, when we talk about some of them, there's the Great Mughal, the Great Table, the Florentine, there's a few different coloured stones and a few different cuts. I think it's really important because, particularly in the jewellery market at the moment, the types of diamonds that are growing in popularity. I'd say they're still niche, but they're growing in popularity. Is some of the antique cuts, and biased as it may be, it's really a market trend, right? So things like table cuts, things like rose cuts, things like just cushion cuts, old line cuts, even briolettes, they're starting to be more popular again. And Tavernier discovered diamonds in quite a few of these particular shapes, actually.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he had the chance to see them as we know them today, to be honest. So Tavernier was a very lucky man. He had the chance to handle and draw one of the most famous diamonds in diamond history. Of course, the Hope Diamond in Seraph stayed. We also have the Koh-i-Noor, the Great Mogul, the Florentine diamonds. He probably had the chance to handle the stones during his 2 visits to the court. And many of these diamonds later on became parts of the jewels of other imperial courts as well. Like the Florentine diamond ended up in different places, acquired its name because of its association to Tuscany. We talked about the Great Mogul and the Olaf diamond in previous episodes, so if you have the time, feel free to check them out and learn more details about those. We owe a lot to Tavernier when it comes to the history of those diamonds, because he's one of the first to describe them in great detail and draw.
So he's done 6 voyages, Fenia, right? Before the 7th and the final voyage, I think it's important that we just talk about kind of the man himself, just to get a sense of what I always think about when we talk about these historical figures. I always think, who are they today? Which dealer that we work with would be closest to this person? And I kind of say, oh, that's modern day John or Mary or whoever deals, right? So, but I don't think there's anybody like Tavernier, right? But there's one thing I would just want to explain, right, that I think will give a good insight into his mentality, right? And he had loads of facets to his personality. I think I might have said that in the last episode as well, right? But he did. But the way he priced things, I think, is quite interesting, right? It shows attention to detail and just he's real commercial minded, which I think overall, when I think about his trips and what he did, there was an adventure, but it was commerce driven, I think, So what he did, right, he had only 2 categories of diamonds: very good stones and then the not good stones, the perfect and the imperfect. And he had different pricing structures for those 2 types of stones. Now, what was also very interesting is that he was way ahead of the curve, because with lab-grown diamonds today, the GIA are only grading the perfect stones, and they've basically got the same thing. The GIA are now saying, lab-grown stones, there's perfect and imperfect. And if it's imperfect, we don't grade it. And if it's perfect, we grade it, which I think is D, E, and F, or better. Right, F or better. And it has to be VS. So they've actually taken the exact same division that Tavernier took in the 17th century, but for lab-grown diamonds. So his pricing was 150 livres per carat for the perfect and 80 carat livres for the imperfect. So what he did is he'd take the value, whereas 150 and 80, and multiply it by the weight of the stone squared. And that was the value. Take away 2%, he always paid 2% taxes to the king of Golconda. That just shows he was always thinking this was like a trade expense, it was tax, sort of, but he volunteered to pay it. It's very clever, keeping the Golconda obviously wasn't one source of diamonds, and he was keeping the person who controlled those diamonds really happy with this 2%, right? And it was factored into his calculation. He also preferred colourless stones, but he did sell many fancy colours. But even if there was a little hint of a colour, it seems to me like he just termed it as colourless, even if it would be a blue or a pink diamond today. Yeah, because royal inventories, they had discrepancies between his notes and what they bought. And I think he liked to kind of just categorize them as perfect or imperfect. He didn't get into colour too much. Apart from when it was so clear, you had to, right? I think that just from the outset, a trader who would do it like that, he had the maths, he had the values, he had the know-how to include the payment to the Golconda. I just think it gives a great insight into his mentality.
I feel that diamonds and gemstones and jewelry in general are very beautiful and captivating objects. It's very difficult not for them to grab your attention either way because of how they look and their value, their intrinsic value. However, I think that they become even more beautiful when they are associated to very fascinating personalities. I think it's the people at the end of the day that make history and objects worth studying. And as you said, I don't think that there has ever been a second Tavernier. This man was like one of a kind in many ways, famous and infamous. You can always like admire and criticize, like many other people during history, in history. As you mentioned, definitely a business savvy, a very skilled merchant and entrepreneur. There are many different ways to approach and study his personality today. I would say that the book that he wrote is possibly the source to explore if you want to learn more about the man. Although, as we said in our previous episode, we have to be conscious of the fact that Tavernier did not write the book himself entirely.
Nice.
He was a merchant and he was aware of that. He wasn't a writer. And he wanted to produce a very nice book. He wanted good results, so he hired ghostwriters. And many of the things that he writes in the book that you see in the book were actually written by somebody else. Now, that does not mean that it's like inaccurate.
But is that normal for the time period, Fenia? Or is that very deep?
I'm not really sure. I don't think that it's weird though. I think it makes sense that he hired somebody to help him with the project, especially considering that he was asked to do so by the king himself. So the French king was aware of like the importance of Tavernier's journeys in many ways. They were important in many ways, not only because he was bringing like valuable items back to Europe, and he was adding beautiful items to a king's collection, but the king was aware that Tavernier was not only gathering jewels, he was also gathering knowledge, and this knowledge would be valuable to other French merchants as well. We are in a time period where the Dutch and the English and the Portuguese have expanded towards the east. The Dutch especially are dominating in this particular field, and I believe that the French king wanted a piece of the pie. He wanted his merchants to do well as well, which makes sense. And that's why he asked Tavernier to write this book. The book was not created while Tavernier was traveling. It was created right after, like some years after the Sixth Voyage, which means that Tavernier had to go through like decades of notes and records in order to compile this manuscript at the end. It's a huge endeavor, and that's why I believe it makes sense that he had help from other people.
But it is his drawings in the book.
Yes. It's not necessarily his words always, but it's definitely his spirit in the book. And like his years of work, his years of traveling, all of his notes, all of his drawings, they were there. And of course, I'm pretty sure that he supervised the entire endeavor and he made sure that it's like accurate and to his satisfaction. We have to remember that the final product should be to the satisfaction of Tavernier, but also to the satisfaction of the king, because it was a project that started because the king asked Tavernier to do it. So
he might not have done it.
If the king didn't have, we don't know. We really don't know. Maybe somebody else would do it afterwards, after his death. There are many instances of like descendants of a certain person who discovered the materials, the archival records of past relatives, and they decide to like write about them.
Sure, the latest Cartier book by Francesca Frigo, that's done by someone, like, she wasn't there, but she got all the letters.
Yeah,
so.
She's related to the Cartier family. She has access to all the materials, so she managed to compile a very detailed and concise and very engaging book about the history of her family.
What are they going to do when, in 40 or 50 years, Fenia, when you're a retired, world-famous jewellery historian, and we've no letters or handwritten letters? We're just going to go through our WhatsApp chats and do it that way, isn't it?
We'll have to wait and see what will happen.
No, seriously, when's the last time you wrote a letter?
Yeah, I don't think that I've ever written a letter. Emails.
Do you keep a journal?
I do keep a journal, yeah, but it's in Greek people, so you won't be able to read it unless...
Unless AI can translate it at that point, yeah.
That's a good point. So, we are exploring ways that we can study Tavernier's personality and get to know more about him. So the book is the first way to go. There is also a fantastic portrait of him. If you are into like visual learning, if you value like drawings and portraits, that's a really nice way to look at the man himself for sure.
So, Fanny, I think it's important to remember that, right? So he's keeping his detailed notes, right? And he has the drawings that we talked about of the actual gemstones and things. But it marks a kind of, if you're thinking about jewellery, right? Prior to this time period, jewellery was heavily focused on gold plating and gold work design and enameling and ecclesiastical pieces, well, along would be. But it kind of links up quite well that on the discovery of these impressive stones, the style of the jewellery actually, it tends to change throughout this time period, where you get like a large stone that's set to the centre of jewellery, whether it be pendants or brooches, whereas prior to this it would be mainly the gold.
Okay.
But it's a big shift in how the jewellery actually looks. And obviously the discovery of the mines in Golconda, discovery of gemstones in South America as well at the same time frame, it just feeds the market where you can supply them with these beautiful quality and good coloured and larger gemstones, and then affords them the opportunity to make a different type of jewellery whereby these precious stones were the focal point rather than design around the outside of what typically was gold work.
Okay.
So it actually is quite an important trend in jewellery design that emerges alongside Tavernier's voyages.
Alright, so you're saying that like before Tavernier we did have gemstones in jewellery, but because we didn't have so much access to the material, like the jewellery looked more, we were focusing more on like the gold work instead of like highlighting a certain large stone. Am I correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think that Tavernier had like influenced this particular change in fashion in his own way, or was he just like a product of his time?
It contributed to it, but it was changing anyway. But it just obviously all, like it was like a tributary of a river just flowing into the main river. And so much.
That's a beautiful analogy.
I was like a big river that flowed into a bigger river. No,
That's fair enough.
but that's what it is. So the trend was going that way.
Okay.
But in other adventures, I'm sure, were contributing to it, and he was in a very serious way because he got the blue diamond, he got the Koh-i Noor, the Orloff, and then these big stones are going into the French court, and then all of the who's who of the 17th century are seeing these big stones and then making jewellery around it. So I can't say for sure that he influenced it, but it seems to me that his work certainly created the conditions where it got more popular.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Were you curious seeing his face while we were doing the research for this episode? Because I was very, very curious.
To see his face?
Yeah.
There's a few images of him, which are quite interesting, but they're mainly, I think there's a famous one that he did on the release of his book,
Yes.
which was, I'm just looking at it here now, Les Six. Ross is going to hate this. He says, when I do my French accent, it sounds like I'm trying to impersonate a French person, right? Which I'll let you be the judge of that.
Well, I'm trying to impersonate an English-speaking person and then we can still understand the struggle.
Vanya, I really mean this. Out of the two of us, you have better English. The cover of his book here, I'm looking at it, and just to answer your question, Fenia, you're looking at it. He's in a beautiful dress. It's a Persian clothing, and it was given to him by Shah of Persia on one of his visits. It's called a kilat, which I think is pronounced kalate. An oriental garment gifted to him by the Shah of Persia. It looks so beautiful, embroidered, very rich colours, very bright with the headpiece. So he looks a little bit eccentric, but the book on the front of it says Les Six Voyages de Jean-Baptiste Tavernier. And it says a que baron de Baron. That's talking about when he was the baron. Qu'il a fait en Turkey, en Perse et aux Andes. So the 6 voyages that he did in Turkey, Persia, and India, and then a few other words which I have to try and translate on the spot and might get wrong. But it talks about the information on the religion, the government, the costumes, the commerce, people, and the value of money throughout these different areas. So really quite, I'd actually love to get a copy of them. Is this available to buy?
It should be available to buy, like copies of this book. Because it's very old as well, you can also find it available online. Like there are projects organized by the famous libraries all over the world. They digitize their books and you can access them for free. I know that you can definitely read Tavernier's book on Internet Archive, for example, which is legal and safe and very nice quality. So if you're curious, feel free to check it out.
Okay, so Fenia, that's actually really cool. You can actually look at this online.
You can.
I am not a good researcher on this anyway. So how would someone do that? They just would, like, is there a website or just...
Yeah, you can tap Internet Archive, you create an account for free, and then you can borrow any type of book you like. They have digitized the majority, like many books. If you're dealing with something that is very, very old and there are not rights tied to it, 100% you can go there and you can read it yourself. Very easy. I use it a lot, especially when I'm preparing for our episodes and podcast episodes. Remember when I was reading the introductory paragraph from his work the other day during our previous episode?
Yes.
I was reading it from Internet Archive. Like I had the entire book in front of me.
Wow.
So,
And these are free.
they are free, yeah. It's easy to access them and everything. So I'm looking at the portrait right now, Matthew, and it's a fascinating portrait. Tavernier was in his 70s when he sat for this particular picture, for this portrait. I can see how elaborate his robes are, as you mentioned. He wears fur and like silk garments, brightly yellow, and like rose things here and there, and a large turban. He also has, I'm not sure you see it, Matthew, but he has a beautiful table cut diamond, a solitaire table cut diamond on his small finger, which I think is an indication, it alludes to his, to the fact that he is a gem trader, he's a gem merchant. I'm very interested about his face in particular. I know that he's 70 years old, but when I look at this portrait, what I see is a very meek and gentile is that the word? Like very meek and calm and quiet, elderly gentleman. Like I would have never imagined that this particular guy, the guy that I'm looking at right now, traveled the entire world and possibly faced lots of dangers and talked to kings and emperors and came back to tell the tale.
It doesn't look like that.
He looks so like innocent and not, I don't know.
Got a big eye. Well, he's got big eyes.
Big blue eyes and rosy pink lips. The turban looks too big for his head. Like I would have never imagined that this is how Jean-Baptiste Tavernier looks like. They said that he was extremely, he must have been a very eccentric personality and a view, something to behold in the streets of Paris. They said that he used to wear this type of clothing when he was back in Europe. So I assume that he must have been a very interesting sight amongst Europeans and amongst French people, especially if he was wearing his diamonds and his exotic clothing. They say that his house was filled with all of the objects that he collected during his travels, which makes total sense. I would have really liked to go there and see what he had gathered.
He was an enthusiastic collector.
Enthusiastic collector. It reminds me a little bit, this habit of his, it reminds me a little bit of his father. As we have said in a previous episode, Tavernier grew up above the map shop. His father was an engraver and he was specializing in creating maps that depicted faraway places. And Tavernier was very lucky to meet very interesting people in his youth because of his father's profession. So lots of merchants and travelers would visit his father's shop to buy maps, and they would bring marvelous items from the east. The young boy looked at them, and this whole experience ignited the passion to travel himself. So I assume that when he had the chance, he did the same thing. He started collecting things himself, enjoying things himself in the same manner that those people who visited his father's shop did.
Well, apparently the inventory taken during the sale of his estate documented that he had furniture, silks, curiosities, lacquers, jewellery, pearls, all sorts in his inventory. So yeah, it makes sense that I would have been surprised now if he had a lot of jewellery and precious stones. That's not based on anything other than that. Typically, what I've seen is that when people are in this industry, whatever their stock in trade is, they tend not to collect it themselves. They tend to have some sort of complementary interest. Like, I know a lot of jewellery dealers who like buying watches for themselves, but they don't deal in watches. So they'll buy and sell jewellery, but they'll keep watches for themselves. Anyway, we'll actually have to have a look up, see if we can find the inventory for the sale of estate. But no doubt he was a bit eccentric. He wore some of the eccentric clothes that he acquired along his way, like collecting different things. He was an adventurer, a traveller, a merchant, gem dealer, an author, a collector.
Yeah.
He did it all.
He did it all. Was he eccentric, Matthew? Just eccentric? Or was he worldly?
I mean, often they're really just depending on their perspective.
For sure, yeah. Tavernier had the chance to travel to so many different places and gather experiences that other people in his lifetime could never. Like just the fact that he traveled so far away into the East and had the chance to like meet and converse with like emperors and kings, the fact that he handled so beautiful and valuable stones. He had so many experiences, and it's difficult to return back to your country and the society you left behind and be the same person and fit in with the rest of the people. He was a different man when he came back.
I think it's fair to say, Fenia, that he did influence massively the jewellery industry as a whole. He's widely recognised as the most important diamond dealer of the 17th century. And that, along with the change in the style of jewellery, which is still prevalent today. If you look at a lot of jewellery shops, if you were to walk up through Powers Court here at Grafton Street, you'd see a lot of jewellery that has stones set in the centre, typically surrounded with diamonds now, which he would have been a pioneer in providing the materials that led to this. So I think you can say he did influence in a very serious way. So we know a little bit now, Fenia, I think it's safe to say, about Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, the man, right? And I think it's so interesting that even after 6 voyages and he's got his book done, he still had that itch, he still had the restless feet, like he had to go on a 7th journey, right? And the man was born in 1605, was it? So he's about 80 when he's going on this journey.
84.
84. He had a chateau in Switzerland. Why didn't he just retire?
Yeah, he had a chateau, he had his portrait taken, he was very, very famous and celebrated writer.
He's married.
He was married, he has met one of the most important rulers of the world back in the day, in Europe and in the East as well. The man couldn't stop though, if you think about it. And I think that his end, the last chapter of his life, highlights his personality the best. Like we have been talking about his character, I think that this particular section of his life is the most representative of his personality. He's close to 80, he's over 80 at this point, and he's approached by the French king, in order to create a company very similar to the Dutch East India Company. So, as we said, the Dutch are dominating in this particular field. They have these companies that have established particular trade routes around Africa that go all the way to India. That's the reason why Tavernier, as we said in the previous episode, chose to go through land and utilize the old Silk Road route instead of going the other way by the sea. So towards the end of his life, the French king approaches him and he's like, we should do something for France, something similar for France as well. And this project is called the Brandenburg Project, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yes.
So he's invited at nearly the age of 80 to help establish an East India Company for France. The project was not as successful, but the idea that the guy was like entertaining the thought of establishing something like that and being active in something like this is like astonishing. It's almost entertaining. Like he wasn't listening to his body. He didn't want to stop at all. And we know that towards the end of his life, he didn't know that back in the day, but he decided to go on the seventh voyage. He left his castle and he decided to return back to the east, this time through a completely different route.
Yeah. Russia.
So he decided to go the other way, and he eventually died there. He's buried in Russia, so far away from home, which I think it's very fitting for a traveler, if you think about it. A little bit tragic, but very fitting.
I think that's very appropriate in a way, like better that than passing away as a sickly old man in his Swiss chateau. I think that he died as he lived. Like, he died as he lived. As he said, like, yeah, maybe he wasn't listening to his body or whatever, but I also suspect that he probably went on that voyage knowing that it would be really dangerous. Like, traveling is difficult at the best of times. Traveling by road from France to India through Russia is going to be extremely arduous. And I say he probably just thought, I'll just go for it. Like, I think that's what he was born to do. So why would he say, oh no, I'll just go do this other thing? If he could still do it, I think he was always going to do it. And I guess he was probably just going to keep going on journeys until he did drop dead on one.
Indeed.
If he had done the seventh, I'm sure he would have planned an eighth.
Indeed, yeah, that's a good point. I actually think that I made a mistake regarding who invited him. I see that in our notes. Veronique has noted that it was the great Elector of Brandenburg instead of the French king who invited him to establish an East India Company. But regardless of that, a big endeavor for sure. There are many stories about how he died. Some people say, like legend says, he was attacked by a pack of dogs and he died a very brutal death in Russia. We don't know for sure. And I suspect that maybe this story was circulated afterwards to support the idea that the whole diamond was cursed as well.
I think it's fitting that he died on the road. And he's left quite a legacy behind him. And if you think about it, a man who was born above a map shop in Paris, who spent his life making those maps for real.
Yes.
And left us with the most extraordinary stones as proof. He lived a charmed life.
You know, Matthew, sometimes I read about people who are always on the move. They keep pushing for the next chapter. They're trying to live the next adventure, the next trip. And I wonder, do you think that he was really happy? Was he restless in a way? I wonder why he wasn't able to enjoy the end of his life in his chateau in France or in Ireland. This inner urge to keep exploring. Is it a lack of happiness, or is it just, very intense desire to keep living?
Well, I think that the question is, Fenia, maybe he was happy in his chateau in Switzerland. Maybe he was happy, but maybe his passion, his calling, was to do these voyages. He was probably very happy there, collecting the things, but it probably didn't give him the satisfaction that it didn't scratch that itch that he really was born to do. I think he was content in Switzerland, but to live with a true sense of adventure that he just needed. He just needed it. And I would say that sometimes people do a lot of anti-stress today, and they're like, oh my god, it's traveling and you have so much work and all this, and I can tell them, you don't get tired of these shows. They're exciting, they're fun, you're really breaking ground. Once you get bitten by that bug, I think it's very hard to stop. Very hard. And he was born into it. He was bathed in this map shop as a child. I'd say he was happy. But he wasn't at peace unless he was on an adventure. Make sure you're following Gem Pursuit on your podcast app, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we're on a whole range of other ones. So make sure you click that subscribe button And we're also on YouTube. You should make sure you follow us there. There's also now a dedicated Gem Pursuit website called gempursuit.com. And our new email, Fenia, it's called info@gempursuit.com. And if you have any questions, or you'd like any further information, or you want to get involved with the podcast somehow, just send us an email on info@gempursuit.com. It's been a blast talking about one of the greatest diamond dealers of all time, who's handled some of the most impressive stones of all time. So we had to split it into a two-part episode to do it justice. I'd like to thank Colin Weldon for the video, Fenia for joining us for this double episode, Ross Hannon of Take Deck for producing it, and Verona Gauguin for the research for these episodes. And most of all, thank you to you for listening or watching, and for me, your host, Matthew Weldon. Until the next time, it's happy hunting.